Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The unified champion Anthony Joshua has addressed the Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller situation, with Miller failing 3 doping tests in quick succession, putting an end to their scheduled fight on June 1st in New York. Joshua, he will be fighting on, just not against Miller. And we'll come to a potential opponent who's emerged in the past 24 to 36 hours, Andy Ruiz Jr. He's just had a win at the weekend, and he will be one of the names that is negotiating with Eddie Hearn. This has been confirmed by Ruiz himself, so we'll get to that news shortly. But first, a couple of quick thoughts on Anthony Joshua's statement. So you can see here on screen, this was Joshua from his own YouTube channel, a platform that he's using more and more, and why wouldn't he? Almost 400,000 views in less than 12 hours on his message regarding the situation. Couple of minutes long. For the most part, Anthony Joshua took the high road. It was a case where we didn't know if Joshua would come out with a statement because he is in camp at the moment. This is something that a rather significant and disruptive event, but he has addressed fans saying that Jarrell Miller, he's not going to kick him when he's down, but this guy shouldn't be in the ring at the moment fighting other heavyweights. And he talked about that karma comes around in all sorts of forms, and if you're a cheat, you will get found out, and there's no place for cheats like Jarrell Miller in the sport, and that cheating will be found out. And I think it was the right strategy here, sort of rising above this instead of sort of devolving down to a Miller level and really getting stuck into Miller. There were a couple of little sort of subtle jabs, and he did also make a bit of a joke about, well, maybe he was being serious, but it was that whole thing about Jarrell Miller's mum, and that if she needs anything, he could provide it. All she needs to do is ask. But overall, the statement from Anthony Joshua, it was a champion sort of like statement. He didn't sort of devolve into any ranting or shouting. It was pitched, I think, at about the appropriate level given the situation, and he was very measured with his words. Obviously, it's probably highly scripted, but that is what it is. And just quickly before I move on to the Andy Ruiz Jr. stuff, you may have seen, or not, I'll just pause that there, Tony Yoka wading in on the situation with Miller. So Raps on TV has spoken to Yoka, who says it's disgusting. It says he goes in deep on Miller, and drug violation, misconduct paints a dark picture on the sport as a whole. And I completely agree with Yoka's sentiment here. It's just a little bit ironic that it's coming from Yoka, who is in the midst of a ban for missing multiple drug tests. So maybe he's not the spokesman that, that should be delivering the sort of message given the position that he finds himself in. So he missed multiple doping tests, didn't disclose his whereabouts, and for some of that time he wasn't in France when, he hadn't updated the drug testers. So that is on him. It's a strict liability system, the whereabouts scheme, and he failed to deliver on multiple occasions there. Hence, he's serving a 1-year ban in France. It hasn't precluded him from fighting overseas, but he's chosen not to. He wants to campaign in his native France. He will be back sometime around mid-year, but very ironic, the height of irony. Anyway, Andy Ruiz Jr., he has emerged as a figure that could be in line for a fight with Anthony Joshua. Ruiz, he was I'll just pull it up here, so he just fought Alexander Dimitrenko just over the weekend. So Dimitrenko is a bit of a high-level gatekeeper in the division, top 50-ish, somewhere around there. He's a guy that you should get past if you're going to go anywhere in the division. Andy Ruiz Jr., as we know, a former title contender, fought Joseph Parker for the WBO world title back in December 2016. Very close fight, very close fight. I scored it a draw on the night. Some people had it for Ruiz, some people had it for Parker, but it was a close fight, and Ruiz was obviously very disappointed with the result, and we'll come to that soon. But he says in a statement here, Anthony Joshua, I'm your opponent for June 1st. I'm here, I'm ready, sign your portion. It's been a long time coming. We should have met a few years ago when I fought for the WBO belt. Styles make fights. I know my style is one that you wouldn't have met before. The WBO belt is actually mine because the whole world knows that I beat Parker for it in New Zealand. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but there was some controversy about that, or, fans were split on that. It wasn't sort of conclusive either way. I beat Parker for it in New Zealand. I've been waiting a long time to get these straps from you. You can hold them for me until June 1st. To anybody counting me out already, get in line. I've been counted out since I first started fighting. Nothing is stopping me now. 100. Eddie Hearn at Premier Boxing. And also in another post on social media, so this was an interview that he did a post-fight after beating Alexander Dimitrenko at the weekend with Fight Hub. I'm not going to play that, I'll get copyrighted, but his statement here to the side: "I'm still a young, fresh fighter. I've sparred with some of the best fighters out there. I've helped some of your favourite fighters get ready for their big fights. I went 12 rounds with Parker, so did AJ. AJ was never closing to knocking Parker out." Well, neither was Ruiz Jr., to be fair. "The style AJ brings, I believe, would be the easiest compared to Wilder and Fury." And in this little clip, he does actually sort of touch on that he thinks out of the three that Joshua is the best style matchup for him. He's not saying it's an easy fight, but he's saying that he believes his style is well suited to Anthony Joshua. And when pressed on the other sort of elements, well, does the money play a part? He's like, well, obviously, it's money, but it's also, I believe, he's the best style clash for me. And talking to BoxingScene.com, Andy Ruiz Jr., he advised BoxingScene.com that he and his team are meeting with Joshua's promoter Eddie Hearn to discuss filling in for Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller, who was denied a license by the New York Athletic Commission due to failing 3 different tests for performance-enhancing drugs. And it also lists here fighters such as Luis Ortiz, Michael Hunter, Manuel Charr have previously been mentioned as possible replacements. And there were some other names as well, Dillian Whyte included, but he sort of bowed out of the race now that he's fighting Oscar Rivas. And even though he called that out saying he would fight Anthony Joshua, well, that fight was announced over the weekend, so clearly it was pretty much signed, sealed and delivered, and maybe it was just done for profile. Dillian Whyte never felt like he was going to take that fight unless he was paid crazy money and the sort of terms he was asking for the first time around. And if he had have taken that fight the first time around, we wouldn't have been in this situation with Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller. They would have been fighting at Wembley, and that they would have already fought. That would have been on April the 13th. So, Dillian Whyte's decision to turn down that fight, handing it over to Jarrell Miller, ultimately has seen Miller caught here. So it's, it's not Whyte's fault or anything, but obviously him turning it down sort of set a set of circumstances in motion that led to Jarrell Miller being caught. Obviously, Miller doping, it's all on him. It's on no one else but Jarrell Miller. And I think fan sentiment on that is pretty clear that it is his fault. It's nothing to do with, anyone else. He injected the stuff into his body, put it into his body, and he's got to pay the consequences now. And when I did a poll on Twitter talking about this, asking fans, what do you actually think about this? What should the ban be? And it was about 50% believe it should be a 2 to 3 year ban. So that's interesting. Whereas about a third thought a life ban, and then others 6 months or less was about the final 20% or so, whatever it was. Anyway, Andy Ruiz Jr., I actually don't mind that fight. I think that's probably just as good a fight as the Jarrell Miller fight. Anthony Joshua would go in the massive favourite for it, but Andy Ruiz Jr. is very durable. He's got a good chin, very fast hands, some of the fastest hands in the heavyweight division. And I think he would probably, for some rounds at least, give Anthony Joshua some trouble while Joshua starts to work him out and try to break him down. Maybe it doesn't end in a stoppage, this fight. It potentially could go to points. But Andy Ruiz Jr. is no gimme sort of fight. And I was thinking about this option compared to Michael Hunter. And Hunter seems to be the front runner at the moment. Although with Andy Ruiz coming into the picture, I noticed that the media and some fans have automatically leapt on it as a situation where Ruiz must be the favourite now. But him coming into the picture and being a viable and credible opponent, I think this is, being put out there, possibly by Hearn himself. Obviously, Andy Ruiz Jr. is talking himself up as well. But some of this is for negotiating purposes, because if Hunter was just the favourite and he was effectively competing, negotiating against himself, he'd be able to drive up his price, to fight Joshua. Because remember, after all, these fighters are just not going to accept anything. They want to try to get as much as possible. If that's an extra $1 million or $10, they will try to get it if they can. But if there's more competition and credible competition, that is obviously good for Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn to try keep, and DAZN, because they'll be paying for this, the purse, to try keep the amount that they pay whoever the opponent is down. But yeah, I was thinking about Michael Hunter and Andy Ruiz Jr., and I think I would favour the Ruiz Jr. fight over the Hunter fight, just because I think perceptions around Michael Hunter albeit, he's on the rise. He's had a couple of good wins. As I've spoken about before with Michael Hunter, he has come up from cruiserweight, and he's been matched perfectly against two, big lumbering guys who he's been able to pick apart. Whereas Anthony Joshua, completely different to that version of Martin Bakole that Hunter beat back in October, and obviously Alexander Ustinov is faded beyond belief. So I think for me to really get excited about a Michael Hunter fight, there's still one more step in the heavyweight division in terms of an opponent that he, would have had to have taken for me to actually go, yeah, that is definitely the fight. And he has said on social media that Alexander Povetkin was offered the fight on May 25th, which was his next scheduled fight date, but he turned it down. Hunter said he said yes to his part of the deal, that he would take that fight, but Povetkin was the one that turned it down. But Ruiz, I would favour that over a Hunter fight. I still think that Ruiz Jr. would be a massive underdog in that fight. He's not without a chance, but he would be a massive underdog. How about you? Do you rate Andy Ruiz Jr.? I guess some of my reticence about this fight, though, is he's been quite inactive. Since losing to Joseph Parker all the way back at the end of 2016, he's only had the 3 fights. He had a big gap ahead of this fight with Dimitrenko, and his weight was one of the highest weights he's actually had for a number of years. So he was 263 pounds for his last fight, only just over a month or so to a fight with Anthony Joshua. Could he get himself into the sort of condition that he would want to be in? He was around 250 pounds or so for the Joseph Parker fight, which I think was probably about optimal for how he likes to fight and to maximize his speed advantages. So, I just don't know if he could potentially get into the shape he'd want to, although I think it would be a decent enough fight, although I think Anthony Joshua wins it though. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.